Hey guys, welcome back. In today's video, I am replacing a thermostat in a Chevy Sonic. This vehicle had a thermostat code and the vehicle was not coming up to full operating temperature, which means the thermostat is stuck partially open. So the first thing I did was release the pressure from the cooling system and remove the hose from the upper part of the reservoir. I then unbolt the reservoir and set it off to the side. Now I did not fully drain this cooling system. I just put a pan underneath to catch what spilt out while doing the thermostat. Now there's a whole bunch of sensors on the back side of the head. I just went ahead and unplugged all of them, as they all end up in the way sooner or later. Now some of these will have a gray safety tab that you have to pop out partially before you can unplug the sensor. You will also have to take this bracket loose that holds the wiring harness. There is a 10mm headed nut that you take off, and then the bracket comes off the stud. Next, there is a coolant pipe on top of the thermostat housing that is a quick disconnect. Now I barely pulled on this and it broke, and when I called the dealership they said that it breaks on almost every single one they do. So you may have to replace this pipe as well. I will have the part number later on in this video and I will show you how to replace this pipe. After that, we have to unhook the heater hoses and the radiator hose from the thermostat. Just to make it easier to gain access, I use a remote reach hose clamp plier. This has a pair of pliers and a cable running down to a set of clamps that squeeze the hose clamp. Once you squeeze the clamp, then you can move it off of the barbed fitting and then release the hose off of that fitting. There are two heater hoses on the back of the thermostat housing. And I do the same procedure for all three of these hoses. You can use a pair of channel locks or adjustable grip pliers to get down in there, but it is easier with this tool because of the limited space. And while I'm taking these hoses off, if you find this video helpful, go ahead and hit that like button. If you want to see more videos like this, go ahead and subscribe. If you have a friend with a vehicle that needs to perform this job, go ahead and share this video. Once you have all three of these hoses removed, we need to remove the thermostat housing from the cylinder head. There are 4 bolts with a inverted Torx head on them. This is a special socket that you may not have. I'll put a link down in the description for a set of these. And then there is also a steel pipe that attaches to the lower front section of the thermostat housing underneath where the radiator hose was attached. You want to be careful when you remove those other 2 bolts because the pipe goes underneath the exhaust manifold into the front of the engine, and there's only an O-ring holding that in there, and you don't want to have to take that pipe out and replace the O-ring. So moving it as little as possible, go ahead and take those 2 bolts out, and then you can remove the thermostat housing from the engine. Once you have the housing removed from the engine, you're going to want to clean up the surface on the cylinder head and on that steel pipe that was attached to the front of it. There is a small O-ring on the steel pipe. Replace that if necessary. The new thermostat housing had a aluminum section instead of all plastic. I'm guessing this is a redesigned version. The new thermostat and housing came with the gasket pre-installed, and it also came with a couple sensors on the housing, so I didn't have to transfer any of that stuff over. So get it positioned in there, and it's best if you start the 2 bolts on the metal pipe first before bolting it onto the head, just so you have a little bit of wiggle room. But I did not tighten them all the way down until the housing is attached to the cylinder head. Now I'm going to play the rest of this in fast forward, as it is the same as the removal process. As I get to the end of this, I will show you how to replace that hose. But tighten the 4 bolts of the housing to the cylinder head, and then go back and tighten the 2 bolts that went from that metal pipe to the housing. And then you're going to hook all the sensors back up. Hook up your radiator hoses, reinstall the clamps back to their proper position. While you're in here and the coolant level is drained down partially, if you have any hoses that you need to replace, now would be the time. Once you get your stuff plugged back in, reattach that bracket with the 10mm headed nut. And then we can go ahead and reinstall the coolant reservoir and attach that upper hose to the top of the bottle. Now, if you broke the other hose on top of the thermostat like I did, now you're going to have to replace that. That hose is routed over the top of the intake manifold next to the fuel injection rail, and it attaches to the throttle body. So as you can see here, this is just the route that it runs. It goes through the wiring harness, around the intake boot, and there's a spring-loaded clamp at the throttle body. Now, after fighting with it a little bit, I realized that it was easier if I removed the air filter housing to get to it. During this process, I also figured out that the lean running code was caused by a damaged air intake hose, and that hose I had a special order from the dealership. Like before, this process is speeded up. You pretty much have to just route it through all the wiring harnesses and around a few of the coolant hoses, and snake the old one out, so you can get the new one in there. And here is a part number of the hose itself, and this is new from GM. On this particular vehicle, the customer wanted all factory parts. And here is the difference between the new one and the old one. There's about a 1/4 inch of that nipple broken off below the O-ring, so this hose wouldn't have been able to seal up properly in that new thermostat housing. So I'm just going to route it back through all the hoses and wiring harness. Now, I did have to transfer that spring-loaded clamp from the old hose to the new hose where it attaches to the throttle body. It just snaps onto the thermostat housing, hooks back onto the throttle body, slide that clamp down onto the barbed nipple, and now we can refill the cooling system. Now, this vehicle calls for a 50% mix of water and Dexcool coolant, so that's what I'm using here. Now, I filled it a little over full and then started it up with the radiator cap off for a little bit, and the level went down. I then just added a little bit as I ran it, and then put the cap on, test drove it, brought it back, double checked the coolant level. Go ahead and clear codes, and you should be good to go. If you found this video helpful, hit that thumbs up button. If you want to see more videos like this, go ahead and subscribe, click the bell, and thanks for watching.